Hey there everybody. So we're going to be reviewing the 6.3 release. Now in the release notes here we've got two items, the recurring products and the on-site editor. But there's actually quite a lot more in the release notes, so we'll try and get through these as quick as possible, but there's some good stuff in this one. So opening this up, the first one here is enable shipping by default. So this is just a little tweak to the products. So normally when you set up a product by default, the enable shipping was turned off. So typically you're going to have shipping most e-commerce stores, so it was just annoying to have to then go back, particularly if you didn't realize and you've got 100 products and then you've got to go back and adjust all those. So enable shipping here is turned on by default now. So that's just should be helpful. And now the system is sending the invoice number along to the payment gateway. So the invoice number will actually pass through as some data to eWay or Authorize.net, PayPal, or Stripe. And just a note with Stripe, it's actually down in like the metadata. It's not sort of assigned with the order, the main order fields. It's kind of lower down in a section they call metadata, just in case you weren't seeing that initially. Then we have recurring products and cancellation subscriptions. So this doesn't just cover recurring products, it's actually recurring orders for almost everything. So we had recurring orders with secure zones, but now we also can do recurring orders for events, recurring orders for products, and just generic recurring orders for just like a payment form. So it's really quite thorough and how this is working. So in the notes here, there's quite a lot more information going into how each of those different types of recurring structures are working. So there's some revisions to the secure zone recurring logic, and basically just saying that the form type needs to be generic, and it will only show when you get to the settings part of the form, it will only show the secure zones that are recurring. If you're setting up a recurring form, and it won't allow you to take a recurring payment for a secure zone that isn't recurring. So they kind of have to match up. And then some rules for the shopping cart. So it looks like you can't mix products that have different recurring periods. So if you have a monthly recurring and a yearly recurring, they can't be purchased in the same order. Actually, they can't. It looks like they can't be put in the cart together. So just something to be aware of with that kind of recurring situation. So then the order itself. So once a recurring type order is placed, so it still shows up in the CRM as an order. But what you'll see now is this blue dot appear next to the initial order, the main, what they're calling the main order. And you can see here the grey dots indicate the order that's been reoccurred. So these are ones that have been created from this main. And additionally, if you click into the main one or any of the recurring ones, you will now see an additional tab here called sub-orders. So it will actually show you all the associated sub-orders to the main order. So you can see them all nicely grouped together. And then there's also the cancellation of recurring orders or subscriptions, basically. So you can see within this section we have the cancel subscription button, so you can cancel that as well, and that will pass through to the gateway and cancel everything. And in these notes here, you can read through these for a better idea on how that's all working, but we also will get a few more properties in the liquid object. So when you're looking at the order in a liquid output, it will actually tell you whether it's the main order. It will give you the ID, if it's a recurring, if it has any active subscription. So you'll be able to tell in Liquid whether it's active, whether it is actually a recurring order, to write any of your own custom logic if needed. And then there's also a cancellation form. So I believe that's available in the toolbox. So let's say you're setting up your own customer area where they can log in and see their orders. I'm just going to go to the page here. So in the Components Manager or Toolbox, under CRM, cancel subscription form. So we now have that to paste into our layouts. Now you can see here it's got an if condition around it. So by default, it's primarily designed for the orders layout. So if you're rendering the orders, because what it's doing here is it's actually checking the order object, and if it has an active subscription, if the order that we're rendering out has an active subscription, then it can show the cancel subscription form, because obviously you don't want to show that for regular orders. And basically what that subscription form is just a button. So it's just a button wrapped in a form script that just fires off to the cancellation API endpoint with the ID of the order. Now there's some rules around who can actually cancel an order. So from the front end, and it goes into more detail here in the notes, but basically from the front end, only the logged in user who belongs to that order can cancel it. So another logged in user can't cancel someone else's subscription. And then, of course, an admin can cancel it from the admin side. So, okay, then we have recurring events. So again, it's very similar to the product. So you can just tick if the event is recurring. Let's jump over here. So now we have a option down here for the recurring type, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. And there's just a note here to say that if you try and delete the event, an error will show up if there are active subscriptions against that event. So basically you can't delete the event if there's active subscriptions. So then we have the recurring generic form. So if you just want to set up a recurring payment for not against an event or a product or secure zone, it's just a generic form payment. We now have an additional form type. So let's just say this form here. So under the type, where we had generic, single, and checkout, we now have recurring. So recurring is for forms with arbitrary recurring payment collections. And once you select that, we have the recurring type. So again, daily, weekly, monthly, or yearly. And basically, whatever payment you collect in that form will then recur on the recurring period. Okay, and one thing to note, if you do select a recurring type, the accept payment field is added by default. So you can't take a recurring order without taking a payment. So that's sort of locked in there by default. And there are a bunch of other sort of rules and logic listed here in the release notes about how those will work if you don't have payments assigned or various fields that are needed. But I think all that's fairly self-explanatory. Okay, so coming down to the actual recurring product. So just a few changes with that. I think they're just making the recurring types the same as the secure zones were. So I think from memory we didn't have daily. Maybe anyway, now it's consistent with all the other recurring settings throughout the system. And similar to events, you won't be able to delete a product that has an active subscription against it. And then there's just basically some logic here about basically saying it has to be the right payment method as well to accept a reoccurring. So obviously it has to go through the gateway because it's the gateway that's going to be polled every time to do that payment again. So obviously you can't do a reoccurring payment with cash. Okay, the next item here is the OSE, or the on-site editor. So obviously the replacement for the nice editor. So I'll just bring up a site where we can look at this a little better. So if I go to the on-site editor now, and of course it will load the front end. So basically this looks to be basically just reinstating the same functionality we had before with NICE, but they've replaced the actual editor. So when we select something and it brings up the actual editor, so this is now the same editor that's used in the admin. So that was updated, I think, with version 6 as well. So it's a little bit nicer, but basically we have the same functionality. We're just editing the blocks of text, and we can save that from the front end. So no new functionality brought in here at this stage, but I know there are plans to definitely improve on that going forward. Okay, so basically NICE is back. Next item is the CRM Contact states. So I think the last release we had the admin roles added to CRMs, and we had that sort of contact state, the icon change for some CRM members. Contacts. So we had like this sort of icon here. So more has been added to this whole idea of having states for a contact record. So now it's to do with the secure zone membership and the whole logic around users subscribing as secure zone members. So now basically we have the ability to disable the email verification flow for secure zone subscriptions. So if you want to just turn that off, you can do that. So in settings, miscellaneous, I believe it's under the CRM settings, we can enable email verification. It will be on by default because that's how it used to be, but now you can turn that off. So basically when someone subscribes, they will just get logged in straight away. And the verification email that they just have to click the link, that won't get sent if this is off. So that will simplify the registration process in a lot of cases. But note it will also make it a little less secure as well if your site's susceptible to spam entries like that. Okay, and because the system basically is tracking whether that CRM record or that email address is verified or not, there's just some changes in logic to what happens when a user changes their email address. So if you have a account management sort of page with the account update form and the user changes the email address, so the same sort of logic will apply there. If you've got this email verification turned off, then they'll be able to just change their email address, and that will just happen straight away. But of course, if you do have verification on, which how it used to be, the change of their email will actually go into like a pending state, and they'll be sent the verification email again. So they'll have to verify that new email before it actually changes in the system. So nothing really new there, just that if you do turn this off, they can change their email address straight away as well. Okay, and then we've just got some new indicators to show where a CRM contact is at. So like I just showed before, we go here. So we now have some icons displaying next to their names to indicate whether they're, firstly, whether they're a member, so that's just the grey icon. And then if they're a verified member, it turns blue with the blue tick. So again, if you have the verification turned off, then and someone registers, they'll just go straight to being a verified member. Otherwise, you'll be able to see who isn't verified yet. So that's really handy. And to help with showing these sorts of states, there's now an advanced search option above the CRM contacts, and you can basically filter between who are contacts and who are members. So we can show all just members. And then if you're showing members, you can also show whether they're confirmed or not confirmed. So whether the email address is verified or not. So non-confirmed, should only see that one, and confirmed. So just some really helpful tools there with managing secure zone registrations. Now we're also going to get some extra data properties in Liquid for the CRM. So if you're outputting CRM contact information, we'll basically get these two new fields here with CRM type. So that will tell you whether they're a contact, just a regular contact, or whether they're a member, so they subscribe to a secure zone. And then you'll also get, is email verified? And that would be basically a Boolean, true or false Boolean, saying whether they're verified or not. So you'll be able to detect this in Liquid as well for your own logic. But just on that, there's a note here that says these filters we're talking about the filter here, but also in Liquid, it uses the actual CRM contact data that's saved against that record. So, and I think what this means is that if you turn email verification off, it's not needed. When a contact registers to the secure zone, yes, they can log in, they don't need to be verified, they'll show us a member in the system, but the actual saved data for that is verified field is still false because they haven't been verified. So if you later turn verification back on, those users will not be able to get in because they haven't actually gone through that verification process. So while you've turned that off and it's not required, the contact still hasn't technically been verified. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you ever change that later and turn it back on, you may have a whole bunch of users that now can't get in. So you would have to deal with that. And I think that's what it's saying here, that the search actually works on that. So I guess if you've set verification is not required, then you're probably only going to see members like this as a grey icon. And that would be fine. That just means they're members. They've got access. So you don't need to see if they're verified or not if you've turned that off. So just something to keep in mind there. Okay, and the other thing we had was the ability to resend the verification email. So if you are using verification and we click into a user, I think it's on the subscription tab. Yeah, so we have an extra button here to resend verification. So obviously that will send the email to in case they report that they didn't receive it or something like that. So that's all very helpful. Okay, and then there's the Contacts Advanced Search, which I talked about on the contact list. Yeah, okay, so next item is changes to the CRM Contacts scope of data. So basically all the rules and the logic around who can update what states and roles and things like that to do with all these new changes with the contact states. So you can have a read through these, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but basically it lists who's allowed to change what. So obviously from the front end, if you're logged in, you can only change your own status. So if someone a logged in user submits a contact update form with someone else's email address in there, it won't allow that login user to change that contact's states or any information really. So there's just some checks in place for all those sorts of things. And just basically saying that a logged in user can't change their own role. So if they're like an admin role, they can't give themselves that role. And the last 2 points here are about what fields will update any sort of form submissions from a customer. And I think there's a fix further down in the release notes which will go into this a bit more detail. So I'll leave that for now. And the next item here is saying that this is particularly related to like the reoccurring orders, but really any order. So if a customer has been set up, they've made a payment, and their details have gone through to Stripe, then if a customer updates their information in a contact update form, the updated contact details, or the system fields basically, will get pushed through to the related contact in the Stripe admin. So you're updating their information in Stripe as well. It'll get pushed through. Okay, and then going back to the point I was talking about up here about how the CRM contact information is updated, because previously we had the issue where basically any form submission using an existing email address would update or override the information stored in the CRM. So even if they're a customer or a member, if just say anyone came along and submitted a form using someone else's email address, they could override their phone numbers, addresses, things like that. Or if someone purchasing in the shop uses a new address for that particular order, it would actually override the address in the CRM, things like that, or phone numbers. So that's now actually been addressed. So the system basically checks if the email already exists, and if they're a member, only if they're a member can they update their information, I believe. So if the email exists and they're a member, I assume if they're logged in perhaps, then their CRM information will update. But if they're not a member, then it won't update the CRM details. And the same sort of logic applies to if you have the advanced CRM groups set up. But yeah, there's more information on the deeper logic there. So hopefully that addresses the issues people are having, particularly around shopping cart orders, I believe. Okay, next item is the update form field names for consistency. So this is just a sort of a minor cosmetic change. Basically, in some forms, the names of the fields were all lowercase or camel case. So now they're just creating all the field names with uppercase letters to begin with, just for consistency to make all that work similar. But that's backwards compatible, so even if you have old forms that aren't using that same syntax, that will still work. Then we have invoice number sequencing on editing orders. So I believe now we can actually change the invoice numbers. So if we're looking at an order, so you can see I've actually changed some invoice numbers, but we can go in now and edit the order and basically change the invoice number. Now at the moment, I don't know if this is a bug or not, but I can change it to basically anything I want. But I think from reading this, it's actually going to check for what the next invoice number should be and just basically make sure that's incrementing properly, I believe. I'm not sure on the exact logic there, but yeah, I don't think we were able to change the invoice numbers previously. Okay, next item, check wholesaler status on payment flows. So basically this is just checking to see if the current logged in user is a wholesaler. So this obviously relates to any payment style forms, and just checking if they're a wholesaler and they're submitting the form with their email address as well. So basically, if you submit a form as a wholesaler to get that price, but then you submit it with another user's email address, it won't allow that. So you can only submit a form with the wholesaler price if you are the actual email address of that logged in user. So just sort of a bit of a security check there around allowing that wholesale price. So the next item here is the import contacts improvement. So basically just when you're importing contacts, the system is checking whether the email address has been changed or not for an existing record. So if you're importing contacts with the IDs present because you're wanting to update a record, the system's going to check to see if that email address assigned to that ID has been changed in the import file. And basically if it finds that email address elsewhere in the contacts, some other contact has that email address, then it won't allow, it will skip that update. But if the email address is free, vacant, then it will update. Okay, there's been a slight change, just allowing 2 more file types to be uploaded into the file manager or via FTP. And then restrict selecting child module that is already set as a parent to another module. So this is kind of a bit of a bummer really, because in version 5 you could actually, when you're nesting custom modules and you select the parent and then a child module, you could actually select another child to one of the child modules. So you can kind of have this cascading nesting structure. But the system wasn't really cut out to do that, and there were some issues. So it's kind of more of a bug fix in version 6 that's now not allowed, so you can only nest parent-child modules. But of course there are other ways to link modules together with data fields or just using categories, things like that. So there's ways around that, but just be wary if you did have that sort of multi-nested structure in place, you may need to rework that, because once you make any changes to those items, it sort of all breaks the nesting structure. Just before I get into the bug fixes, there was another item which I don't think was listed here in the notes, but on the analytics page now you'll see available storage as one of the tiles. So basically now they're showing the storage space usage for files, the database, and what your current limit is. And there's an upgrade link here. Currently this just asks you to contact support, but I believe there's plans to automate that process so you can purchase your own upgrades to disk space. And also remember you can edit the analytics tiles here, so you can move this around, perhaps put it at the bottom or make it smaller or whatever, or maybe even just delete it altogether if you don't want it there. So that's just a nice little feature, and you can also see that in the file manager itself. Just at the top here it will show you the usage. And from an update I saw in Slack just recently, I think that storage indicator will update every 30 minutes, so it will check if you delete a bunch of files, it might not update for 30 minutes. Okay, and then there's a whole bunch of bug fixes, so I won't go through those in this video, but just have a quick look through those if any of those are affecting you. There's quite a lot there, so that's good to see. And yeah, that's version 6.3. So, alright, thanks guys, bye.